It's no secret that Maverick Protocol or Maverick Exchange has been shaking up the concentrated liquidity industry with all the new tools and features they just released for concentrated liquidity providers. So with that being said, we're going to be taking a look at if Maverick is the best place to provide concentrated liquidity. Once again, this is going to be my complete honest opinion. I'm going to go over any strategies that I might get into. Hopping into it, I want to take a look at the TVL of Maverick Exchange. As you can see, it launched back in March of this year, basically on March 1st, starting with a TVL of $500,000. And they did do an airdrop for liquidity providers. I personally got like an $80 airdrop in Mav token. I claimed it. I'm still holding those Mav tokens in my wallet, and I think they're worth like 20 bucks now. But they peaked their TVL all the way back in July at roughly $60 million, and now currently sit at half of that at $32 million. And if we look specifically at the Mav token has a market cap of $95.5 million, and it is an inflationary token, which means that we are most likely going to be getting Mav incentives for providing liquidity on Maverick Protocol. Let's hop into what this is. First off, they claim that they're an automated market maker for all market conditions. If you guys don't know, when you're providing concentrated liquidity, well, you can take upside exposure or you can take downside exposure. But the thing is, you are very, very limited when you're providing concentrated liquidity on Uniswap. You simply set your range, and then from there, that's your range. You can always adjust your range by getting out of the position and getting into a new one. But it's very, very simple, and your liquidity is dispersed evenly across every price within your range. And then Trader Joe brought in a new concept where you can provide liquidity across shapes. So you could do spot, curve, and bid ask. And with spot, it's the same exact thing as Uniswap v3 concentrated liquidity. Curve is a little bit different. It focuses the majority of your liquidity on current prices and then puts less and less liquidity as you get to those outlier price points at the very end of your ranges. And then bid ask is the complete opposite of curve. It puts a lot on outlier price points, but like barely any on current price points. So Maverick Exchange is on Ethereum mainnet. That's where the majority of the liquidity is, but it's also on ZK Sync Era, BNB chain, as well as Base chain. When we go over to the pool section, you're going to notice a few different things when we click on a pool. We're going to have a few different options when we are providing liquidity. As you can see, we have mode static, mode right, mode left, and mode both. Mode static is going to be the same exact thing as if we were providing liquidity on Uniswap v3. We essentially select it, we select our range, and then from there, that's our range of liquidity. That's exactly where our liquidity is distributed. Now, one thing I want to mention is the user experience with using this tool is very, very nice. It's very easy to interact and see where the liquidity currently is and where the price is currently at as well, which is something that I do like about this exchange. But to go a little bit further, they also have mode right and mode left. Let's take a look at what these actually are. So if we select mode right, essentially what this is going to do is constantly move our liquidity to the right. So that means we could start with, say, wrap staked Ethereum in this pair, and then as the price moves to the right, so as the price goes this way, our liquidity is going to continue to move towards the right. So if we start right here, and when we put all of our liquidity on this price point right here, when the price moves to the right a little bit, like right here, well then of course our liquidity is also going to move to the right. When it moves to the right again, our liquidity is also going to move to the right. But the thing is, it's only going to move up. It's never going to move back to the left. So it's essentially our liquidity is always following to the right. But the thing is, if we witness a scenario where the price moves to the right and then it goes back to the left, well then of course we're stuck all the way on the right. Now this is a good scenario for tokens like wrap staked Ethereum paired with Ethereum. And the reason why is because wrap staked Ethereum only grows in comparison to Ethereum. Each and every single day, wrap staked Ethereum is worth more and more Ethereum, which means one day it might take 1 Ethereum to equal 1 wrap staked Ethereum. The next day it might be 1.01 and then 1.02 and then 1.03. And the reason why is because wrap staked Ethereum represents staked Ethereum, except the yield, which is about 4% or whatever, is compounded back into the price of wrap staked Ethereum. So this is a good pool to use mode right on, I would say. And then of course, if we are looking at it vice versa, where we are looking at how many wrap staked Ethereum it takes to equal 1 ETH, we'd want to use mode left, which is the complete opposite. It only moves to the left. Now mode both is just going to be a tracker. But the thing is, you're going to have a lot of impermanent loss in both mode both, mode left, and mode right. And the reason why is because you are tracking the price of the asset. You are constantly rebalancing your position, essentially. This is the same exact concept as if you were to deploy Uniswap v3 concentrated liquidity on a very tight range. And then, of course, whenever the price moves, you just move your liquidity. Moves again, you move your liquidity. You're constantly finalizing more and more impermanent loss. Your goal is that those fees are going to make up for that a certain amount of impermanent loss because you are on a super tight range. But mode both is pretty interesting if you don't care about impermanent loss, or if you're providing liquidity for something like wrap staked Ethereum to Ethereum and you're getting a good return on it, because essentially you're tracking the overall price of the asset, which is allowing you to have very, very, very tight range liquidity which ultimately allows you to collect a lot more fees. So let's go and recap that real quick. I would use mode right for something like wrap staked Ethereum to Ethereum. And if I was doing something like USDC, USDT, since these are stablecoins, I would probably just put all of my liquidity on a single price point of 1 and use like mode static. If I'm doing something like Blur ETH, I might, maybe, depending on the strategy, just use the mode both so I can constantly track the price. Or if I really wanted to, I could also use mode static and use the same strategy as if I was doing normal Uniswap v3 liquidity. So there are use cases for these different modes, but it is very, very specific. And personally, I think the volume is pretty good compared to the overall TVL, but at the same time, a lot of the volume is on pairs like wrap staked Ethereum to Ethereum or ETH to SW Ethereum or stablecoins. You don't really have stuff like ETH USDT that has good volume. Like for example, ETH USDT here, 175k in TVL, it has 100k in volume. And when we look specifically at the fees, that's $43 in fees. If you're trying to make a $10,000 deposit, you're not going to earn anything, guys. That's what I'm going to go ahead and tell you right here, right now. You're way better off just going on Uniswap or even better Trader Joe to get a good return on that. Whereas with stuff like Blur ETH, if there is consistent volume, like as you can see right here, it's a high fee tier, there's consistent volume, 57k of liquidity, 59k of volume. That's $592 in fees. So a 682% APR. This is a good strategy to run on this position because there's such high volume compared to the overall TVL of this pool. Now, if we look at some of these boosted positions, this is where you're getting those additional incentives, whether it be in MAV tokens or whether it be into incentive tokens provided by different protocols. So if we look over here, we can see Go USDC is a boosted vault. Our APR, we are being paid out in Go. We're being paid out in USDC, which are the tokens that we are providing liquidity for. We are also being paid out in more Go incentives. So this is essentially Go bribing, or I should say OV, because Go is native to OV, bribing this pool and bribing people to provide liquidity for this pool. And ultimately, this is a very, very good concept because it allows more liquidity to come into Maverick Exchange, or Maverick Protocol, I should say, ultimately allowing for more volume to happen over here. Because if you guys don't know, a lot of people nowadays are not using specific decentralized exchanges. I am not going to go over to Uniswap, I'm not going to go over to Trader Joe, and I'm not going to go over to Maverick to execute a trade. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to a platform like swapdefilama.com or Paraswap, or previously before they got exploited, KyberSwap. What I mean by that is if I trade Ethereum for USDT, let's just say I want to trade 1 Ethereum, you can see it's going to route me through the best possible exchange to make the trade. In this case scenario, it routes me through Aux. And over here, you could see I trade 22.92, I get out 22.90. So I lose 0.12%, not too bad at all. If I'm trading like 100 Ethereum, you can see it routes me through 1 inch, a completely different exchange. Here I'm trading $229,256. I'm getting out $229,000, except I'm losing about $200, which is really, really good because if I were to just go onto Uniswap, well, I'm losing about 0.15%. Here, I only lose 0.09%. And even then, there's some other aggregators like CalSwap, where in this case scenario, I don't lose really anything. I only lose like $50, which on a $200,000 trade, that's not too bad. So once again, I highly encourage you guys to use aggregators, but of course, the incentives are a very good thing for protocols because when there is a ton of liquidity, ultimately that means the aggregators are going to favor them more because there is deeper liquidity, there's going to be less slippage, and you do have to factor in the liquidity provider fee. And with that being said, these fees on here are pretty reasonable for traders. You have 0.01%, 0.03%, you also have 0.04%, and then going up, you have 0.4%, you have 0.3%, you also have 1%. You have a ton of different fee tiers here, which can get confusing for liquidity providers, but it is also favorable for specific pools that do have deep liquidity. So one of those would be this Go USDC pool. It has roughly 1.5 mil of TVL, and as you can see, this is probably a pretty deep liquidity pool for the overall Go liquidity because there's $32 million in total volume throughout this entire pool, basically. So let's talk about my in-depth analysis. Personally, I think this is a really, really good platform, but at the same exact time, there's not enough volume for me to go and deposit into here. If I go over here and provide liquidity for wrap stake ETH to ETH, that's a 10% APR. That's not bad whatsoever. But the thing is, you have to factor in, there's only $643 in fees right here. So I'm not going to be able to deposit $20,000, $30,000 without diluting that return. Same exact thing if I were to provide liquidity for Go USDC or go down the list and provide liquidity for some of these stablecoins or anything along those lines, especially stuff like ETH to USDT. At that point, I'm better just getting on Uniswap. So my analysis, this is a pretty cool platform. I really do like it. I have personally never provided liquidity onto it because, of course, with with these newer platforms, you do take on the risk of it being potentially exploited, but at the same time, you also take on super high yields. In this case scenario, Maverick is kind of in the middle. It's not a super new protocol. It's been out since March. It's also not one that has $5 million in TVL. It has a good 30 mil, peaking at above 60 mil. But at the same exact time, it does not have a huge amount of liquidity to the point where a ton of trades are routed to Maverick. I think if the TVL were to get to $100 million on a specific network, that's where a lot of those aggregators start to route over to Maverick, and there starts to become more and more volume every single day in Maverick. The thing is, across decentralized exchanges, it's basically a monopoly now. You have Uniswap, which is pretty much the top DEX, which is always going to be a part of your trades if you're swapping through an aggregator, if you are doing highly liquid pairs. One way that Matic could incentivize more liquidity is by going to new protocols and incentivizing them to provide their liquidity on Maverick instead of going over to Uniswap. And what I mean by that is if there's a new hype project that just launched, they should incentivize that new hype project to provide liquidity on Maverick and put up initial liquidity on Maverick and launch on Maverick instead of going and launching on Uniswap. Because once there's deep liquidity on Uniswap, it's hard to compete with that because a lot of trades already get routed to Uniswap and you have all the Uniswap liquidity providers. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Maverick. I know I've already said this, but this is a pretty great product. It's just, I personally would not invest into it at the moment, and the reason why is because of the consistency, and I can't really find any pairs that I truly like and would be comfortable depositing $10,000 to $20,000 into them. But if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, notifications turned on. We do have a free concentrated liquidity mini course, which is linked down below in the description. It's on sale for Christmas. It's only $35 right now, and we are going to be raising the price on January 1st. And if you are looking to get into this industry, I highly recommend you check that out. Worst case scenario, you're out $35 and you've determined that Uniswap isn't for you. Peace out, guys.